So Wocan was started in 2004 by a group of women who were all working within environmental and agricultural organizations, NGOs around the world. All of us got together and said we face the same problem, which is working within the institutions that were trying to do something on gender or claim to do something on gender equality and mainstreaming, but in actual fact we're doing almost nothing. So we as senior women staff of those organizations were ourselves feeling quite frustrated that we were not able to use our own institutional positions to bring any degree of attention to gender within these institutions or to bring new resources to women's groups working at the local level. So we decided that what made sense would be to have an organization that was women-led, that focused entirely only on those issues, and to build a network around that. And I think, not too surprisingly, but within the first 3 months of initiating Wocan, we opened it up for membership applications, and we were flooded. I think we had about 35 applications within the first 3 months, which indicated to us that we hit a nerve. We hit a need that was deeply felt by women professionals in these fields that until that time did not have any sort of collective output of, or organization that suited it. Well, obviously, in terms of membership, we've now grown to over 1,000 members in about 109 countries, I believe it is. It's moved, I think, we've realized that it's difficult for us to meet the needs of all those members. It would be wonderful to do so, but it would require a much larger organization with a much larger outreach. So what we focused on is instead building the capacity of other women and men who joined them, and this is very important, to be able to deliver the kind of courses and capacity development so that we have a broader outreach. We've also tried to establish offices and presences within a few countries of Africa and a few countries of Asia to try to best meet the needs of the members, but also to develop programs and proposals that can address the needs of rural women's organizations, which is the ultimate aim of Wocan, after all, is to link professional women and men with the rural women's organizations that could use their help. So I must say that when we started Wocan, I think we were in only a handful of organizations, women-led organizations, working in this field of agriculture and environment. I think we're still only a handful of organizations in that field. So we are unique in that our membership and our staff have, first and foremost, are professionals with degrees and experience in agriculture, natural resource management, who then bring in the gender expertise on top of that. And that makes it very different, and that makes it much easier for us to talk to fellow professionals in those types of institutions, because they can identify that and we can speak to them in the same language. We're coming from the same professional field. So that makes us unique, I think. And I would have thought 10 years after we formed Wocan that perhaps other organizations similar to us would have evolved. But I frankly are not aware of that. And we have learned in Asia from some of our donors and colleagues that in fact they have found through surveys that Wocan is the only institution in Asia, for example, that does have this mix of expertise. So I think Wocan has been inspiring others. I think that's the greatest achievement we've done. You could tell this through the membership applications, for example, where members come to us and describe what the organization means to them, what they would like to contribute to the organization, and that's always good to see. But I think it's other types of things we've done is we've offered a kind of a thought leadership, very much around the topics of leadership per se. We have sort of developed, I can't claim it's ours, but the idea of relational leadership practice, which puts a stronger emphasis on the kind of relationships that women are having and practicing anyways, but not naming it as leadership. So I think what we've been able to do is to convince some of the members and the people we work with that, in fact, this is a form of leadership that can also be called leadership. Leadership is not just hierarchical in nature. And we try to practice this kind of relational leadership throughout the organization and everything we do. It takes longer, it takes building relationships, but it has a more long-lasting impact. In addition to that, I think our other big achievement is the creation of the W+ as the women's empowerment standard, and the first one of its kind in the world. It's quite an innovative idea to certify projects that in fact deliver results to women's inputs women's lives, instead of just measuring inputs and outputs as is often currently done. The struggle, I mean, I hate to say it because it's NGOs, every NGO struggle, but it's that of financing and funding. It's just very, very difficult for an organization like ours that stands on principles of relational practice and things like innovation to be able to come up with the kind of funds that allow us to continue to innovate and to develop the kind of partnerships and relationships with others who could upscale those ideas. We really require the kind of core funding that we were fortunate to get from Norway that allows us to have the power and to make those decisions about how we allocate resources in order to best achieve those aims, rather than always being in a project orientation, which is a bit more limiting. Having said that, I think there's also been challenges around the fact that we're small. We're small, and so we get unnoticed. Donors, corporations, and others seem to immediately think of the names that they know best, which are large NGOs, which are not women-led NGOs. And so it's not just Wocan, it's all women-led organizations, whether they be at the global level or the local level, struggle in terms of having recognition of their work, as well as, and that translates into a challenge for funding. Really very personally rewarding to me is to see that other women leaders, for example, or potential leaders, are able to particularly realize that potential and have that, perhaps that aha moment particularly within our leadership training course, when it all comes together for them and they start to understand that the difficulties and the frustrations they've faced in their work are not necessarily because they are themselves not strong individuals or not capable of doing the job, but rather institutions and cultures have really been formed in a way that really makes it very, very difficult for women in these positions. So I think the realization of the systemic discrimination or factors that limit people's growth potential is a very empowering moment. So that's been very wonderful to see. In addition, I think what's been really wonderful is to see when we have women farmers who also stepped into very strong leadership positions. And even when we've brought them to regional and international advocacy events, and they deliver the message so calmly and so smoothly and so articulate that they voice the concerns of rural women in a way that makes the world listen. And I think that's been also very satisfying. In looking backwards over the last 10 years and thinking, what have we learned in the process? The major fact that emerges is that this approach of gender mainstreaming is a very difficult one to be successful. I like to say it's because the carrot and the stick are not big enough. So despite a little bit of money, and a lot of talk, there just has not been, we have not seen big successes in mainstreaming gender into these institutions. This is for a lot of reasons, but I think it forces us as Wocan to step back and say, right, if that theory of change, of building leadership within the staff of these organizations so that they become champions and they drive institutional change, if that's not had the impact that we desired and expected, then what? And I think we've come to the realization that they just don't have the power themselves as change agents. And there's not enough drivers of that kind of change of gender mainstreaming within institutions. And there's not an accountability to the so-called policies that exist out there by those institutions. So we flipped it and we said, can we do something that incentivizes those organizations to do the right thing instead? And so we developed, the W+ standard in order to do that. And I think really also in the process, we are also shifting Wocan's focus to that of building the empowerment, strengthening the empowerment of women at the grassroots level. We're convinced, after all these years, that it's those small or not so small women's collectives and groups that exist across Africa and Asia that are usually under the radar. They are not often known to or the attention of donor programs. So as a result, again, they're undercapacitated, underfunded, but with immense potential for growth to address the problems of food security and climate change, for example. And we've seen it again and again. So we feel that strategically, that's a better place to put our energy. And what Wocan can do is, again, to mobilize and use its space within regional and global bodies with partners that we have to find ways to bring those resources to women's groups so that they are able to grow and to realize their potential for that impact.